Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session called There's an App for That, how you can actually run software on HPE infrastructure to drive results. My name is Justin Christensen. I lead the HPE relationship on behalf of Intel. We've got a wonderful panel here, so I'd like to introduce Jonathan Pope. He is the VP of Sales and Partnerships for Arqit. Brad Cardwell, the VP of Partnerships for Kamiwaza, and Matt Valentine, who is the VP of Compute BU and Digital Sales for the UK IMEA region with HPE. A lot of times when you hear Intel or HPE talk, we start with the products that we build, and we have a very hardware-centric view of the conversation. And in this session, we actually wanted to start with how customers are benefiting from using that infrastructure and talk a little bit less about the infrastructure itself. And so what I'd like to do is give each of the panelists a chance to kind of talk about what their company does, how they're helping customers deliver results. Perhaps, Jonathan, we can start with you and hear a little bit about Arqit.
Sure. So as Justin said, I'm Jonathan Pope from Arqit. So we're in the business of encryption, specifically data in transit. So typically, customers will come to us for a number of reasons that are either how do we move to quantum safe levels of encryption on our networks as quickly as easily as possible, or they come to us and they say, how do we replace traditional hardware-based encryption? So, typically, physical delivery of crypto boxes, hardware security modules. How do we replace that with a more software, flexible, dynamic way? So that's very much around, I guess, sort of digitization at the edge. And then the other way, which we're seeing increasingly, is they will come to us and say, data sovereignty and privacy. We're deploying things like AI a lot more at the edge. How can we do that in a sovereign, secure way? What are the approaches we can take? So typically, that's what we're seeing customers come to us for. I'm happy to explain in a moment more about how we deliver that for our customers.
Perfect, thank you. And Brad, actually we talked a little bit there about AI at the end, so could you tell us a little bit about Kamiwaza and how you're helping accelerate AI?
Sure. Thank you, Justin, and thanks for having me. I'm Brad Cardwell, VP of Partnerships at Kamiwaza. I'm based out of Colorado. Kamiwaza is headquartered in the mountains of Colorado near Breckenridge Ski Resort. It's a fun place to be, especially in the wintertime. That being said, we've had the opportunity to be partnered with Intel in their Accelerate AI program for some time now. We've been in market for roughly 1 year's time and made great progress since. Part of that progress has also been joining the HPE Unleash AI program. And with that coupling of those two alliance partners in Kamiwaza, we've validated solutions both on CPUs and on GPUs, and we've got use cases where customers are deploying specifically on Xeon 6 for some back office use cases, seeing some results with that hardware that they've got today. So Kamiwaza is an AI solution provider. We deliver to the market a stack that is private to the customer. Kamiwaza is deployed by containers on that substrate, on that compute substrate, whether that be on-premise in the data center or at the edge or even a piece in the cloud. We solve the problem of data gravity and data security with that deployment model and a handful of other proprietary tools. We go to market to assist our customers in using these tools, helping them to develop those outcomes, whether those be bespoke applications or those be extensions of blueprints that we have.
Thank you. And then Matt, the HPE team partners closely with the ISV ecosystem, with other hardware vendors like Intel, but could you talk about how your team's working with partners like those on stage to help deliver results for your customers in the region?
Sure, Justin. And firstly, good morning, and thanks for joining us. So look, I sit here with two hats on for you today. And I think the first hat is in my role in the Intel Alliance. I'm part of the global team that is looking to build out the ecosystem of our ISVs, which also includes building out our partners' business capabilities and the customer industry verticals that we're looking to better serve through those ecosystems. That's my first hat. My second hat is in the compute business unit. I look after the UK IMEA region, and I'll talk more a little bit about how the HPE compute business unit. Oh, am I not turned on? I mean, I can hear me.
But you sounded great. He sounded like he was on.
It's a technical hitch. Oh. So obviously don't know how to use the technology. You could hear me, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk more about what the compute business unit does. My particular region, key conurbations, big cities in London, Riyadh, Dubai, Abu Dhabi is the kind of regions that we're serving at the moment. So.
I appreciate it. And one of the things I did want to hit on. So we're going to have a pretty free-flowing conversation. It's not a very scripted environment. We want to make sure we're answering your questions. So if you have questions, feel free. We'll have some time at the end. We'll make sure we try and address them. But I think I want to start with how customers are benefiting from using your technology, and also how you're building that on top of some of the HPE hardware, Intel infrastructure, also non-Intel infrastructure. So a lot of times when we talk about AI, we think GPU only. But Brad, perhaps we can start with you, because I think what you and the Kamiwaza team are doing is really unique in terms of enabling people to develop AI workloads and agents on top of infrastructure across pretty much everything HPE has to offer.
It's a fun place to work. I'm not new to AI, but this is a whole nother level. And folks, AI changes weekly, meaning the landscape changes, the models available, techniques used, advancements in the MCP servers, you name it. Our team has a myopic focus on understanding what's being changed in the market and how to utilize those tools for the better. Dirty little secret in here, one of our key engineers, engineer number one, in fact, admitted to me that it's been 6 months since he wrote a line of code. And so there is a new paradigm in front of us. With that, we're putting, as Kamiwaza's ethos, Kamiwaza means superhuman, we're putting superhuman capability in the hands of customers with a stack of software and helping them to deliver outcomes internally that derive ROI for them. Measuring that, in fact. In fact, when we go to market, we're often talking about how to measure the outcome before we're talking about what the actual outcome is. And so this is a workload-based conversation that we have with our customers. We'll go into that a little bit more. But as it relates to the hardware substrates, Kamiwaza provides a tool set that can enable private AI, fully secure with the customer's data, customer's AI, customer's network, customer's security on any type of hardware, any accelerator, any CPU. So when we're thinking about enterprise scale AI usage, Kamiwaza solves this as being an AI orchestration engine, giving you the capability to operate AI solutions of many different types across a heterogeneous substrate. And this is really where Kamiwaza is unlocking value for our customers, is providing them with the access to private AI for innovation, no tokenization, no charge per seats. As much as they can run those Intel and HPE servers, they're getting value from that iterative cycle, creating innovation in that regard. So these incorporate solutions that are very sophisticated, and then on a CPU as well, we think a lot of some of the edge use cases and some of the headless apps, and I can go into that in more detail in probably a subsequent talking point. But these are some ways that we're helping both government agencies and commercial customers realize immediate value, and from that immediate value, they're usually keen to take on yet another use case, again applying that use case to the same HPE and Intel substrate.
I appreciate it. And I think, AI is very sexy. It's something that everyone's interested in right now. You talked about the importance of data, and the security of that data becomes critical. So, Jonathan, you and I had a great conversation yesterday around how you're helping secure some of that data in transit in really unique ways. Could you kind of talk about how you help secure that data?
So I will. I just want to say firstly that, Brad said AI changes weekly. In the area that we operate in, which is encryption, not so much, right? I mean, in encryption, it probably changes every 20 to 30 years, really. So it's slightly more glacial. And look, we're not trying to change that. Really, where we play is to enable our customers to use, classic trusted methods of encryption that have been around for 30 years, but to deploy them in a quicker, more software-defined way, which provides, flexibility, agility. So it's slightly different to the AI world. I guess in terms of the way that we work and how we benefit our customers, particularly when it comes to the data, is we enable the replacement of what traditional defense and security organizations would do, which is physical delivery of these things called private keys. And that works, and that's totally secure. It's just very inefficient and unscalable in a world where you have, thousands, if not more, connected devices. So, if you imagine a scenario where you've got a, remote deployed defense unit, say a forward operating base, and you've got lots of deployed and disconnected assets. So they might be unmanned aerial systems or surface systems. They might be troops. They might be command and control nodes. So you've got a whole communication fabric there, and you want to stop replacing the keys in each of those assets by physical delivery to all of them. You want to replace that with a much more dynamic approach. So the benefit that we're delivering there is absolutely speed, scale, and efficiency. And we're deployed on HPE Aruba and Juniper. So for those connections in transit between various nodes, those VPN connections can go from standard encryption, which is not quantum safe, and where our customers say, look, we want that scalability, but we also want it to be quantum safe, not because we're necessarily worried about the quantum threat, but actually because we want the highest level of security assurance. So those VPN connections, absolutely secured. And then there are two other ways that we integrate with HPE. So one is on HPE hardware at the edge. So the Edgeline server, for example. If you go to the stand, the HP Defense stand, you'll see a ruggedized Edgeline server where our software is deployed on it. And on the screen, you'll see that that is essentially providing quantum-safe level of connectivity across an imaginary deployed distributed assets. Lots of flashing lights and interesting pictures. The final way is in a private 5G environment. So our software works over any bearer. So if you have, as you typically do in a forward operating base or even a campus type environment, we've integrated with HPE Ethernet. So we can be deployed to provide quantum-safe connectivity across that private 5G environment. So of course, the benefits are, security primarily, but we're talking about a scalability that we enable our clients to have, and then we're seeing increasingly this requirement for sovereignty. So this is more about demonstrating compliance very quickly for data security, privacy, as well as sovereignty. Happy to explain a bit more about that in a minute. But we're definitely, we had a look at the Edgeline server and that ruggedized setup. You got more excited than me, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to do
He was so excited, he was dumbstruck.
Do you want to share?
Yeah, it's an important part of what we do, isn't it? You asked me earlier on what the compute business unit does, and I think, just when I look back in terms of our Gen 12 proposition, really it's been carefully designed for its security credentials, for its sustainability credentials. Of course, now software defines everything, doesn't it? You can do so much more. You can protect and secure and automate your platforms. But of course, the ecosystem that you service it in is so important. I think the thing for me is that, why the ProLiant brand has been so enduring over the years is because we have then carefully selected the use case at the edge of the network for AI is very different from somebody that's providing proof of value over agentic AI, and there's a different reference architecture again to people providing high-performance compute stacks at exascale for large language models to help feed all these systems. And I think the reason I get excited is because I hear people like you talk about what's happening at the coalface, and we are then able to bring it back and engineer a platform that enables all of that to happen. And that's synonymous of what we do in the compute business in the ProLiant team.
And that part hasn't changed with AI, meaning that work is all still very important to the delivery of the solution. So it's a workload first mentality, defining those AI workloads. He mentioned lots of scenarios, some scenarios that might even have, let's say, an island of robust compute. That island then being served by multiple edge locations where agents are being orchestrated in a group way across that. They're being enabled by CPUs in large part, maybe on a factory floor or on a retail location. So there's lots of really cool ways then, but the understanding of what type of thermal load you'll have based on that workload and so forth, what kind of model you can deploy on there, what model do you need for that particular use case, all of these things come into consideration, but the fundamental sizing methodology does not change. Its workload first methodology in how we think about these things. You know, we also find that our customers enjoy the idea of scalability by adding more compute. And so when we think about even edge locations, it's not a restriction on how many tokens they can consume, except for how they're bound by the hardware itself, right? So as they want to consume more tokens with further AI solutions on that same stack, that's afforded to them with scaling the hardware. And that's how the model works, is that they continue to put on additional outcomes. We're working with Arqit in some use cases, even talking about having secure enclaves at the edge in battle situations. Those are ephemeral sessions, right, that are on and off in an instant, but fully encrypted out there at the edge, coming back to some large language models or specialized models that know what to do with that data and take action on it, and then instruct those agents to take course.
This is why it's so great being in an ecosystem, because this isn't just a bit of this and a bit of Arqit and a bit of Kamiwaza and a bit of HPE. Actually, we're kind of all working together, and it's been great. Actually, so some of the work that we've been doing with Kamiwaza, as Brad described there, is how can you secure that data going in and out of, say, an edge environment, or even a confidential virtual machine, kind of between two of them cross jurisdictions, where that data isn't necessarily just raw data. It might be inference, it might be prompts, it might be the LLMs, it might be agentic AI. And so we moved beyond where this is just data going in and out. Actually, it's way more sophisticated than that. And I think what we proved in working together is that in many ways, it doesn't matter where the data is. Because if we can secure it using a combination of Intel's confidential compute, so hardware enforced isolation of the data during process, plus our ability to secure the data in transit, then in a way, actually no malactor can access either the keys or the data. So it doesn't really matter where the data and the keys are because they're inaccessible, and which is a great outcome for customers.
Yeah, I think you all are hitting on an important point. So the software that we're talking about in this case can be used for many different use cases, many different industries, and so it feels a bit ambiguous at times. So one of the things that I'd like to maybe expand on is, could you give some use cases that are a little closer to an industry, or and I don't know if you want to start with, you mentioned kind of the military and aerospace complex, or if you want to go with something like retail, but how does this horizontal software stack support the outcomes that the vertical application providers on top of you are providing to their customers?
Yeah, fantastic question. I'll discuss kind of what an ideal use case is our customers are trying to address. For example, where data needs to, in some cases, we talked about use cases where data is actually being transited from an edge to another edge location in most cases. In a different way, Kamiwaza is seeking to solve problems where there are multiple locations of data that has gravity and security concerns maybe across borders. And so an example of that solution, and one that articulates how it could be applied even to other industries, is for a healthcare customer. And I've got this demo on stand if you want to see a little bit more about how this works. But it's a simple demonstration of how we can access data that is resident in 3 different countries in Northern Europe. Those 3 different countries each have an individual hospital in them. We're going to be sharing clinical data as a group across a Kamiwaza inference mesh without moving the data from any one of those 3 hospitals, not aggregating the data, not changing it. And this is a way that we're able to derive value from a distributed data set, or provide what we call an inference mesh for distributed inferencing. So that is how we are delivering even a very secure model for regulated industries, not unlike healthcare, in biomedical research, but also applicable in financial services, similar methodologies applicable in manufacturing, and also media. I'll mention one other use case because I think it shows the breadth of the potential solution stack. A lot of our customers, for example, start with document processing. Document processing on Xeon 6 is quite efficient when you have documents that come in, quote, by the drip. So as they're coming in, an agent then sees that the document has arrived in the email, it opens the document, ingests that document, it asks another agent to take action on that structured data and do something with it. For example, add it to the ERP system, or add it to a forecast, or some sort of other billing or record system. That's one starting way that a lot of customers approach it. Another set of customers, like a media customer that I'm working with out of Los Angeles right now, this media customer provides content that is distributed worldwide. They want to analyze that content before release through the testing cycle for cultural sensitivities in local languages, in local localities as well. And so this gives you an idea from back office processing all the way through media analysis of the breadth of solutions that are available on there. We go to market with partners, however, that have that vertical specialization that can drive some expertise there. And this is the best way that we can serve some of our customers.
Yeah, so is there anything you'd like to add from the Arqit side?
I mean, Brad mentioned financial services there. So, you know, a strong sort of customer use case for us is absolutely where a financial services company is taking data from the edge. So let's say ATMs or branch bank locations, and it's wanting to reduce the time for fraud detection. So it's analyzing that at the edge. And then sometimes, in fact, for the most time, it will also ship that data, back to a back-end server in the cloud. In both of those situations, the requirement really for compliance reasons as well as security is how can they make sure that that is impenetrable, those connections, the data is fully secure between ATM stroke branch and say a gateway server where it's been analyzed at the edge. And between that and a back-end server in the cloud. So absolutely, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that. The other thing is telco. So telcos are under a lot of pressure to migrate to quantum-safe connectivity. And that's either because they need to protect their own core networks or because they want to generate revenue from their customers. So enterprise customers where they want to be able to say, look, you can consume our standard connectivity, or you can consume a premium connectivity, which is also quantum safe. So, do you want the standard or do you want with fries? So we are seeing telcos adopt our technology for both of those use cases. And a sort of showcase customer for us is Telecom Italia, Sparkle, who doesn't need a little bit of sparkle in our lives, and congratulations to whoever named that company. But they are leading the way when it comes to adoption of, as they describe it, a quantum safe over internet. So the world is changing in response to those sorts of needs anyway. So that's two different use cases.
Okay. And I said we weren't going to start with the hardware, but at least in my experience on the Intel side, working with the ISV community and end customers, sometimes it feels difficult. How do I know not only which application I should be deploying, but what infrastructure should I be deploying it on? A lot of times you'll hear us talk about how memory-intensive applications may run best on the CPU. So for example, if you're doing Black-Scholes modeling for financial services, it's going to run really well on an XD230, which has MRDIMM capabilities. If you're doing video ingest, decode, encode, and also inference, you're going to want to split workloads between the CPU and the GPU. So Matt, bring this back to kind of the HPE infrastructure. How do you think about that, and how do you help your partners in the ecosystem as well as your end customers understand what they can land those applications on?
Yeah, sure. Well, okay, I mean, typically, an industry vertical will have already had a first mover in it. So, for example, if we were to have selected hospitality, as we were discussing earlier on, that we won't have been the first person to have thought about an application that drives ticketless entry to a venue. But that application provider might not have thought about encrypting the data and the sensitivity of the data and what could go wrong. They might not have built a stack that sees that go right the way through. So oftentimes, the stack becomes the final point of discussion in terms of how you size things. So we've been carefully selecting different products for the right fit. You mentioned the Edgeline platform, ruggedized platform that people put on the back of military vehicles and things. In retail, we select a platform that might need to run in hot environments because the retail depots don't have the right cooling. And so you have to carefully engineer your platform for the size and space that they've got and the cooling requirements, as well as the technology oomph that's needed. I think it's a little bit easier, isn't it, when you start getting back to the data center, when if people have got room in their racks, they can start building out the right platforms. But look, I mean, it's complicated, and I think this is why we've been building out the capabilities to help people with the testing. Because, when I look at the range of ISVs that are out there, and I look at the range of technology platforms that it could lead to, I've got to be honest, I'm guessing. So how do you remove the guesswork? That's key, isn't it? So, when I go upstairs, I see industry experts, and I feel great comfort because I've met the industry expert on a particular platform. They're going to help me get to the right answer. But, you're going to go back to your office, you're going to go back to your partner, and you're going to say, how do we size this? What should it run on? And then again, we're back to the guesswork. So this is why we've been building our community so that we can offer you the potential in our customer innovation centers. And from my own geo, I know you talked about the work you've done in Houston, but we've got customer innovation centers in London. We've got the Digital Life Garage in Dubai. We're building one in Riyadh. That will give people the capability. So the ISV could come along with a container of their software and size it. Then we can tell you exactly what platform it runs on. No over-provisioning, no guesswork in terms of, should I have run it this way? How many GPUs should I stick in that system? Or maybe it's none. Maybe it's 8. But let's remove the guesswork. And I think that's the key thing for me in an environment where these are very expensive decisions to get right or wrong. That's why we want to move down the route that we're doing in our innovation centers.
Can customers experience the CIC remotely, virtually, or is it a physical attend?
Well, they can do both. So I think there's great benefits in coming to an innovation center. And the reason I say that is because on something like AI, for most people, it's quite an overwhelming phase of knowing that intuitively knowing that there's value in AI, in productivity, and in competitive advantage. And you've heard lots of great stories about it. But you don't quite know where the proof of value is for your own business. And you need time and you need headspace to discuss that with your team. And so our innovation centers, when people come in there, I mean, you've experienced this with customers. Yeah. The first thing we do is we offer somebody in that innovation center that will help the customer and the partner build a business value framework. What are you trying to achieve? What is your version of improvement in your business? And that then allows the customers to take choice. Now, if somebody's already way down the path and they just want to see, right, I've got that container of software, I'd heard you could test that in your Grenoble facility for me. Of course they can do it remotely. But I think that you'd be a couple of stages down the decision-making process to be that clinical with a remote demo.
And I think there's a lot of virtue in the CIC process overall. I've been lucky enough to participate a handful of times. Most recently, I was in Houston with a Canadian software company for payroll services, and they've got 2 data centers in Canada that they're seeking to apply AI to. Well, they had some ideas of how they wanted to apply AI, but no idea how to prioritize which one to try to solve for first, what kind of gear they might need for those. So they were brought into the CIC in Houston, and an ISV like ourselves, Kamiwaza, was brought in to provide a partnership through AI. So we've all seen the bad reports in the media, not necessarily media, but in academic publications like that from MIT about, I think it said as many as 95% of AI projects fail. Well, okay, what's an AI project today? I think a lot of that was on the machine learning side. We're not talking about machine learning. There's off-the-shelf models, or your customers, or even the government organizations have models that they want to use. Private AI is about using those models. But MIT goes on to say in that same article that you see much better results when you partner for your AI endeavors. And that's what we offer, is that partnership, both in the tooling, the support of that tooling, and the guidance in developing those outcomes. And so in a theater like in the CIC, we can, in the first day, this was a 2-day event that I most recently attended. In the first day, there was a lot of discussion around their fear points about how do we make the right decision, what implications may there be to us making a wrong decision? Well, the right staff was there to answer those questions. As we prioritized the use cases as well, there were some like code assistance, there was customer service enhancement, and then another from a financial services, I think a financial planning perspective. That being said, by the second day they came back and they've got an idea in mind which one they want to attack first, and they want to improve customer service first. And we said, what's the high level high-level measure for that, and they said a NPS, a Net Promoter Score. And so that's a fantastic framework to work from, not to reinstitute what we see as maybe, I'd like to put a chat bot with my customer service agents, which we at Kamiwaza say that chat's the worst thing that ever happened to AI. It's really a underutilization of the capability in the way that it can operate. That being said, how about it's more than a chat bot? How about it is listening to the call and taking action on the components that it understands? How would that help the customer service rep to offer better customer service? And those discussions ensue. In that forum, they brought 4 members of their team as well. Other concerns that they had, and I'll just share this, was they don't have the right resources. Again, this is why partnerships with the ecosystem can support these organizations in being some of the first to the table to transform their business. And folks, at AI Speed, starting now is the only way to begin an AI journey. And we see that with our customers, even 150-year-old companies that are taking AI as a leg up to move forward, maybe jumping cloud native all the way to AI.
I think you mentioned sort of customers getting started and where to start. I mean, the other reason as a software business why we welcome being part of a CIC type setup is not just to remove the guesswork, which is totally valid, but also because I think often software is difficult to see unless there's like a front end, unless there's a GUI, and it's kind of all about the use case, and you need to understand and have that bring to life that use case and the application of it, and it's almost like that is amplified when it comes to our particular area, which is in the area of encryption, because in essence it's like, well, you probably didn't even realize that all this stuff was going on in the background historically, and now we're trying to sort of jazz up what's actually changing, and as it happens, surprise, surprise, we're just an ingredient. We're just one piece of a broader solution, and that solution needs to be brought to life. So a CIC as a way to get started, I think is absolutely fantastic.
And one of the things I'm personally passionate about, trying to make this easier. I don't know how many of you in this room are partners that are selling the technology versus customers who are purchasing it. I think of it like a car. When we talk about, especially AI, but when we talk about compute, we're often talking about performance. Well, how many of you own the fastest car that you looked at, or the fastest car in the world? Very few. There's actually a lot of buying metrics that you look at when you're purchasing something. And so we've seen, usually people do start with the fastest car in this case. They'll start with a GPU-based solution. But oftentimes, whether it's due to reliability, whether it's due to the price, whether it's due to the form factor, needing fanless in some of the environments you talked about, there's actually a lot of ways you can achieve helping a customer get that outcome. It's not even a one-size-fits-all in terms of technology. And so we do try and demonstrate this capability at the CIC. But one of the things we're working closely with Matt's team on is not only driving kind of some of the performance benchmarking in labs, but that system sizing and scaling, so that you understand if you want to support a certain number of video streams or inputs, what could you deploy to achieve that, and how do you measure kind of your investment against the outcome you're trying to drive? So, Matt, is there anything you want to highlight just in terms of how we're trying to make this easier for people to pull together all those ingredients in a single solution most effectively?
Yeah, sure. So you probably noticed yesterday, if anyone that attended the keynote, you probably saw the discussion on Unleash AI. And you looked at that screen, and there were just 100 company names up there, weren't there? And I sit there and I think, wow, that's an ecosystem. But I also felt a little bit overwhelmed by it in terms of where do I start? But the thing that I find really fascinating when you get into an ecosystem is that, like you've just discussed today, the ecosystem is joining the dots. And so the ecosystem starts to understand how it can create symbiotic relationships around what you do. So for example, here, you'll all be familiar with people that provide applications that provide a very specific end user outcome, but they're not experts in encryption. They don't have a full stack to help curate the multiple layers of where AI might take them. So they've had a great idea and built an app, and then they need some assistance. So I think that's the first part of things for me, is that the program is bringing together the ecosystem at events like this, onto platforms, into industry verticals, and it radically simplifies the choice points. Now, other people in the room could say, well, I'm working with other ISVs. Brilliant. Bring them to the ecosystem and help them join that ecosystem. as it expands, everything gets better. So I think that's the first part to me. Look, and I think the testing is really a process of understanding. Look, it's free. You know, we've invested in the technology stacks so that people can come along. We've picked the stacks that we believe that roads will lead towards. And of course, we've developed developer stacks so that people can come in and take a look and see what their proof of values are. So I'd only have one simple ask is, you know, don't be afraid to speak to your local team to book what we would call a digital next advisory session. It's free, you get yourself off site, you get all the things we've been describing. One simple ask.
Perfect. And we've got about 10 minutes left. I do want to make this a valuable use of all your time. So if you have questions at this point, feel free to raise your hand. We'll pass around a mic. We'll try and make sure we answer them as best we can. Before we go on to audience questions, is there any closing comments that you'd like to add or any encouragement you'd like to give to those in attendance?
It's not a closing comment yet, but just picking up on what Matt described there. I mean, a great part of being amongst the sort of, you know, the Intel ISV ecosystem is, you know, one of the other vendors that are on the stand is a provider of retail AI analytics, and I'd not come across them before, and it, you know, has sparked an obvious conversation, which is, you know, a problem statement for one of their customers for whom they're providing, you know, behavioral analytics from CCTV cameras in store for, you know, real-time theft detection, as well as, you know, how do we modify, you know, movement patterns and product placement within the store environment. You know, they're using CCTV footage, which is PII data. So the problem statement is, well, okay, well, even if we're analyzing that, you know, at the edge there in store, what about where we do need to ship that, you know, somewhere else? And how do you securely and compliantly ship that data? And of course, you know, that's where we can come in. Absolutely wouldn't have thought of that had I not sat and consumed their demo. So anyway, it's a great example of it.
Yeah, it is. I'll just add that there's amazing power within the tool sets that are available to us all. Running private AI provides a great opportunity for innovation and even business transformation. The imperative is to simply get started. Expect rapid prototyping, rapid proof of concepts that can help you to iterate faster. Typical time to market, even on a conceived and then written and fully deployed and tested commercial-based app, 2 months. Prototypes in 2 days. It's unbelievable speed that we're able to move at with these same tools that are in the Kamiwaza stack. So whether those tools are blueprints of ours that are being used within that tool set, or we're assisting our customers and our partners to build bespoke applications, there's an app for that. It's kind of cheeky that way, right? Apps look in many different functions as we think about AI, but truly there is an app for that, meaning it may exist already out there, it may exist in its components, or we can quickly develop it together in a quick iterative fashion that is, for most customers, absolutely mind-blowing. The setup maybe requires 5 example documents as well to make it personalized to their specific use case. So folks, I'd ask that everybody just be brave. It's a bit to bite off on, but it's a commitment that I think is well worth it, especially in a private AI capacity. I'll mention one other thing from the North American market that any of you that are on the buying side, commercially or government side, watch out for the shadow AI. Not unlike shadow cloud usage, in North America, I've had even hospitals exposed that they have 200 practitioners using AI and they're not sure from an IT perspective how. Whoa, that's not what we're looking for. And so private AI first, not let your constituents or your employees run wild. So I'll share that as a word to the wise. That has been one eye-opening situation, and we're seeing some organizations in America trying to unwind this without removing productivity that has already been put there, but at the risk of customer data and at cost.
I've got one final point I was going to make. You as customers should expect the heavy lifting to be done by, you know, HPE and Intel when it comes to, you know, this sort of myriad of ISVs that are out there, as Matt described. You know, wow, a lot of guesswork. You know, my read from, you know, being on the inside here as an ISV is they are doing the heavy lifting for you. They are filtering through and creating solutionable, consumable outcomes for you. So I think what has been discussed as a great demonstration of that.
And again, I want to make sure if you have questions, we're answering them. I haven't seen any yet, so I'll kind of build on that with the power of the ecosystem from the Intel side. For us, it starts with enabling the ISV and making sure that the application's optimized for the features that are in the silicon. Then it's working with HPE to make sure that that application's optimized for the system that it's configured for. A lot of times what we see, and I'll use a very large coffee company with a green logo, we started working with the ISV ecosystem, and one of our ISV partners was doing like inventory counting for things like cups. How many cups were inside the drawer without being able to weigh or see the cups. Another was doing safety and security. Another was optimizing drive-through. And at the time, these were all point solutions. It'd be like having a different phone for every application you want to use, right? But it's actually all running on something similar, a similarly configured DL380. And so there's also an opportunity when you work with HPE, when you work with Intel, and when you're working with a lot of ISVs to kind of optimize the solution and not have a point solution for every use case or outcome you're trying to drive, which at least is often where we see people starting.
Well said.
I don't see any hands up yet. I did have one. Oh, there we go. A hand's gone up in the middle there. Winnie, would you take the microphone?
See how excited we are.
Sorry, I didn't see who.
A question for Jonathan and Brad. In your experience with customers deploying your solutions at scale, are there any things that they shouldn't take for granted? People, skills. What are some of the pitfalls that customers shouldn't take for granted when they're deploying your solutions at scale, or any solution that matter?
From a workload perspective first, relying on your SMEs. Most of these AI solutions require much more input than IT alone can help with. And so using your SMEs that way. There's also concern with some customers that they're not going to have the right team. For example, the ML world and training of models told them they need a team of data scientists, and maybe that was really difficult for them to retain. Maybe they ran that hill and they started developing their own models and did not see some value from it. These folks are scared in understanding how they're going to scale their organization. Working with an ecosystem like this, typically we're able to get that customer started with an understanding of what type of skills they need to hire for to continue to run that operating model of AI innovation. And I think from our perspective, that's how we're seeing the at-scale issue, is that there's lots of fear that they're not going to have the right employees. Partnership is the way to bridge that, and then helping to identify with common practices how those employees are going to work in that theater.
Yeah, it's a great question, thank you. I would echo that, absolutely. We would always recommend that our customers are consuming our technology through an SI or a value-added reseller who is able to roll their sleeves up and help on the deployment. There isn't much to it, but there's always a little bit of solution architecting that's required. The other area is compliance. With our global hats on, inevitably there is interregional, territorial compliance requirements, which always seem to crop up. As it happens, they specifically do for us because we are classified as dual use. That's not the case for all types of ISV, obviously, but I think it is one to bear in mind, for sure.
Yes, I'll jump off stage.
Thank you all for the session. We've touched on the need for edge computing and processing data at the edge. And we see that more often now with the AI, with building AI strategy for our customers. What would be the benefits you're seeing with your customers going with hardware at the edge versus cloud computing at the edge?
And whoever answers that has 20 seconds.
Yeah, well, let me take a quick shot at it, because this is an area from an Intel perspective that we have a vested interest in. There are a lot of different things that we see as benefits. So I mentioned reliability. A good example, just to kind of like bring it home, when you're doing retail self-checkout, you don't want the machine to go down, right? So a lot of times we'll see people looking for a more reliable solution where they're not going to have to replace parts. Power consumption is huge. From an operational perspective and a cost perspective, yes, but even from an OT infrastructure perspective, a lot of times you're having to invest to deliver more power into the building than you had originally planned on it consuming. And then certainly like security, latency, if you look like the transportation industry, you don't have time to send data to the cloud, wait for it to come back. You have to make those decisions pretty instantly. So there are a lot of reasons. I'm happy to talk about this.
I mean, I would add one simple thing to that. There's data centers and there's centers of data. And the edge is a center of data. And with AI, you've got to use the data where it sits in situ in certain instances. And that's why it's proliferating to the edge.
Yeah. And I think that question actually is a really great question, because we could go industry by industry and talk about why it matters. And I'm happy to do so as well. So I do want to thank everyone for taking your time and joining us this morning. We're really excited to be here. I'm sure we didn't answer all of your questions. So if you do have other questions, feel free to come up and introduce yourself to us, and we'll be happy to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you.